Gravity Rush was one of my favourite Vita games, so it shouldn't come as a complete surprise when I tell you that when this remaster was announced, I quickly pre-ordered an import copy as soon as I got the chance. How does it hold up since playing it almost a year ago on the handheld? Well, let's find out. The story stars Kat, our amnesia-ridden protagonist, whom after an act of heroism suddenly gains a reputation for helping the citizens of Heaksville with their problems caused by the invasion of creatures called the Nevi. Through this, she meets a cast of characters that honestly fall into typical archetypes. You've got the awkward love interest, the mysterious character from your past, and the mystical godlike characters who apparently know everything but won't tell you jack because reasons. And for that, the story just overall comes across as incredibly garrulous at times. From start to finish, little actually happens, and it ends with little resolution into Kat's past or why she's in Heaksville, let alone the fact that she doesn't really seem concerned with either of those things in the first place. All of this aside, Gravity Rush's presentation was something I really appreciated. Instead of voiced cutscenes, a lot of the game's story is told through comic strips that mix between drawn stills and in-engine clips that work really well with each other. The city of Heaksville's different districts have their styles of lighting and music, and really make the world come alive on a visual level. And while the characters and overall story might be a bit bland, the game's setting is a real treat to see and play in. The gameplay in Gravity Rush is mainly using your gravity powers to do light platforming, fight the Nevi, and complete challenges that appear around the city. And that about covers it. Honestly, there isn't much variety to the mission structure aside from a few puzzle and story sequences that take you to special areas, and those are far and few in between and not really great to begin with. You'll usually have to ferry people or objects to and fro locations, only to have whatever original plans characters had go awry by the sudden appearance of the Nevi running amok. The lack of mission variety is astounding, considering most of the fun I've had in the game was completing the various challenges I mentioned. I enjoyed how fast and clumsy Kat's powers are. Her ability to create her own sense of gravity means she's pretty much falling anytime you pick a direction to fly in, and mastering that ability to fall gracefully in 20 different directions, along with making sure you hit the ground running instead of slamming, gave me a really exhilarating feeling I usually don't get in open world games. The game's story mimics very little of that kind of excitement and only boils down to basic objectives that don't really lend themselves well to the things I felt made Gravity Rush fun in the first place. I mentioned fighting the Nevi earlier, and that's something we're going to move on to next, the combat. Nevi enemies have vulnerable spots in their bodies indicated by glowing balls of light that Kat has to hit in order to damage or finish off her opponents. The problem with this is that it requires precision when the combat is anything but precise in the first place. Attacks frequently miss due to the game's poor locking, which means most of the time you miss, you're going to get yourself set up for an attack from a nearby enemy. These problems are only really compounded when you're faced with faster enemies that move in ways the game's lock-on system simply can't keep up with. Certain special attacks don't work on particular enemies at all. Even when you've primed yourself in a good spot to land a hit, Kat will just clip around the enemy and waste the chance to do some real damage. I'm not sure what they could have done in this situation. If they had made the lock-on system better, the combat could have been boring due to the lack of difficulty, and maybe the limitations of the Vita made a problem of creating challenging enemies and rewarding combat in a way that it wasn't really a viable option. But either way, the end result is a frustrating experience that really only gets worse as the game goes on. Since this is a remaster, Gravity Rush on PS4 comes with all of the DLC that was available on Vita. The Maiden Spy Pack aren't much to look at besides throwing Kat in dumb outfits, and while the Special Forces Pack isn't a whole lot better in that regard, I actually had a lot of fun with the missions that followed. I had to evacuate citizens from Nevi attacks and bring them to specially marked areas, while avoiding enemies that by design make you drop whatever you're carrying, or in this case, people. There was also another mission in which a fire breaks out on the ship you're stationed on, and the surrounding urban areas are also aflame. You've got to find water sources and smash those against the flames to extinguish them, and that was probably the most entertaining mission in the entire game. They had a sense of urgency I had experienced while playing the challenges, and I really felt like they actually presented some, challenge to players that honed their flight and gravity skills compared to the rest of the game. In the end, going back to Gravity Rush made me see a lot of the flaws the game had in its combat and mission design that I didn't really notice in the first place. I love Kat's powers and the world she roams around in, but the part where you actually play through it is such a drag in comparison. I still really enjoyed the 10 to 12 hours I spent with it, and recommend it if it sounds like it might be up your alley. I give Gravity Rush Remastered a 3 out of 5.